Hi, and welcome to part four. I'm glad you tuned in. This should be a great review for the test or for this AP test, or maybe just getting the notes for the first time. At any rate, this is part four of sensation perception, and here's a list of what we're going to go through. The role of attention in perception, common impairments in the senses, major psychologist, and a few additional concepts that don't really fit into any category. All right, let's get started. What is the role of attention in behavior? There's three things that come up under this category. The first is called selective attention. And selective attention is the idea that if there's a lot of stimuli, like in your visual field, or maybe it's auditory, but we'll just use an example where it's visual, you only tune into a few things. You select certain stimuli to attend to. Like right now, you're attending to the screen, but all around you, there's other stimuli that you're just tuning out. You're not concerned with the painting on the wall or people walking by. You're just zeroed in on the screen. Another concept is called sensory adaptation. If you have your phone in your pocket, when you first put it in, you notice it's there, you feel it. But after like 10 minutes, you don't notice it's there or not. And throughout the day, you probably check, like, is my phone in my pocket? And you maybe put your hand there to check. So that's called sensory adaptation. Reduction in sensitivity to a stimuli. Your phone, you don't feel it anymore. So that's sensory adaptation. Another concept is sensory habituation, and it's very similar to sensory adaptation. This is when your brain actively filters out irrelevant stimuli. So a baby loves to look at faces, and when they see a new face, they will stare at it, and they'll stare at it for a while, and then they'll get tired of looking at it, and they'll look away. And you can tell when they're not looking at it anymore, they're no longer interested. They've become habituated. They're filtering out that stimuli anymore, and now they are focusing on something else. Okay, another little fact about what we can pay attention to. There are some stimuli that are below our absolute threshold, and those are called subliminal stimuli. So it could be a sound, could be a sight. So that's whenever something occurs below our absolute threshold. Another concept with attention, there's a couple kind of things they call blindness. There's inattentional blindness and there's change blindness. And the research on this is kind of recent, the past decade or so. With inattentional blindness, the idea is that there's a lot going on and sometimes you don't even notice some very basic stuff that's happening right in front of you because you're paying attention to something else. And the best example of this is a video called The Monkey Business Illusion. And there's a link for it on my website, or you can go to YouTube. I highly recommend watching that. Another concept is called change blindness. And with change blindness, it's when something changes right in front of you and you don't notice it. So like you're dealing with a salesperson buying shoes. They walk to the back room to get your shoes. They walk back out. It's somebody else, but you don't even notice that it's a different person. Maybe it's a woman and she's got brown hair and a ponytail, and so did the first woman who was helping you. So that's called change blindness. Also a cool video on my website about that, and it shows you the research they did for that. Okay, what are common conditions or impairments related to the senses? One of them is color blindness. This is a genetic disorder. Usually affects either the green cones or the red cones. And so if you were to look at these two numbers or these two images, people who are colorblind would not see the numbers. There's also a couple of different types of hearing loss. One of them is called conduction deafness. Conduction, think about the sound wave being conducted through your ear, and it has to go through the eardrum and it has to vibrate the little bones that are in there. So if those are damaged, that's called conduction deafness. The second type of deafness is called nerve deafness or sensory neural. And this is damage to the cochlea. Remember, the cochlea is the part of your ear where transduction occurs. Deep down inside, it's the little circular thing with the liquid and the hairs. And if that gets damaged, it's called sensory neural or nerve damage. Good news with the cochlea, in the past 20 years, there's been this invention called the cochlear implant. And the cochlear implant replaces what the cochlear used to do. And so people with that kind of damage, some of them can be helped and can regain the ability to hear, which is quite miraculous. Side note, people who are deaf sometimes like to be around other people who can use sign language. So the name of their sign language, there's many different types of sign language, but the most common one in the United States is called American Sign Language. And often deaf people might choose to go to Gallaudet University, which is in Washington, D.C., and it's a school for the deaf. When my son, Henry, was little, we taught him some sign language, and it was really cool because he was slow to develop his ability to speak, but he could use language even though he didn't have the muscle control to form words. Another disorder with the senses is called synesthesia. This is neurological. It's when the brain will process stimuli in more than one sense. So, for instance, you may hear sounds, but you also see colors when you hear them. So that would be unusual to live with, maybe challenging. All right, what about major psychologists in the field of sensation and perception? There are going to be 4 of them. 2 of them are Weber and Fitchner, and they came up with an idea of the difference threshold, sometimes also called the just noticeable difference. This is the idea that if you have a stimuli, how much more do you need before you notice that it changes? So what's the difference or the just noticeable difference? So if your TV is on volume 20 and you turn it up to 21, you might not notice it, but when you turn it up to 22, you do notice it. So that's the just noticeable difference. They've found out that this difference is a constant proportion. So this is the Weber-Fitchner law, that if the volume is at a level 10, then you need a 3% change to notice it. So if it's at a volume of 100, you also need a 3% change. So it's not a constant change, it's a percentile. It's a percentage that you need to notice. A couple other guys did some research on cats. Their names were Hubel and Wiesel. They did a famous experiment where they deprived young kittens of vision, and then they returned their vision to them later on. But the cats could not, their feature detectives never developed, so they could not develop a sense of angles and edges to objects. So what they discovered, Hubel and Wiesel, is that there's a critical period for the development of the specialized neurons that do the feature detecting. This research was important because it led to kids getting surgery at an earlier age when they have cataracts. And if they got the surgery at an earlier age, then they could develop these feature detective neurons in their visual cortex. Okay, a few last concepts with sensation perception. These didn't really fit into any other category, so we're just tagging them onto the end here. One is called perceptual adaptation. They have some glasses that can distort your vision by 90 degrees, or they can turn your vision upside down. And at first, when that happens, it's very disorienting. You can't pick things up. You're tripping, you're stumbling, you have no coordination. But after a couple of days, your vision actually adapts and you function just fine. So that's called perceptual adaptation. Another item is called the Stroop effect. And I don't have a slide of this, but I'm going to show you this paper. If you color the words different colors than what's written, it makes it hard to say the colors and the written words. So that's called the Stroop effect. This is an example of top-down processing messing up your ability to say the colors. Okay, last thing for the unit. This is sensory interaction. And we noted earlier that smell and taste interact. They're the best example of this. When you smell something, that really enhances your taste of it. So in our class experiment, we did the drinking the different sodas. And when we waved the lollipop under someone's nose that was grape flavored, that threw off their ability to taste the soda and accurately identify which one it was. So that's called sensory interaction. Okay, there it is. There were 4 videos for sensation perception. Hope you've enjoyed them, and see me in class if you have any questions.